It's Friday, so it means it's time to answer some questions from the listeners on this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're also on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Our goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers by opening day. Right now, we're at about 891. So let's get to 900 first, and then in the final month or two before opening day, let's hit that 1,000 threshold on YouTube. So really would appreciate all your effort. And if you already subscribed, send it to somebody who hasn't so we can get to that 1K number. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. I've already bought my tickets for opening day. Not, unfortunately, going to be able to buy tickets to the AFC Championship game between the Chiefs and Baltimore, but if you're planning on, might as well grab it on Gametime. It's so easy to use. They're going to offer you the best possible deals. You can sort through a lot of varieties, and Gametime will not let you down. And we're going to have more on them coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. If you're a first-time listener, we always welcome new listeners here. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, well, I work in sports here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I got a show once a week over there. And then I also have a show Monday through Friday on ESPN Kansas City, 10 to 11 a.m. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world, but when it comes to this podcast, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And with it being a Friday, in other words, my favorite episode of the week, it's a Mailbag Friday. So we have plenty of questions to get into from the listeners. And if you're listening and wondering how you can connect with me, just shoot them over to me on Twitter or X, again, at JohnnyJ_15, or reach out to me on the YouTube channel. Just leave your question below on this podcast page. If you submit it a little bit late after this podcast episode, I will be sure to answer it immediately on Twitter, assuming I'm not busy with other things. Let's dive right into it, though, and get to question number one from the listeners. This comes from Luke Miles on Twitter. He asks, would the Royals entertain signing Trevor Bauer? In all honesty, I don't think anybody in Major League Baseball is going to be signing Trevor Bauer. I'd imagine at this point, he is going to take his talents back to Japan. We just haven't heard anything. I think in the couple times I've been asked this questions, there's not really any new developments, to be honest with you. I think he is somebody that has burned a lot of bridges in his past. I know the new developments of this story, not trying to disregard those at all. But I think we would have seen movement on it already. It could always come out of the blue. Absolutely. I just don't see the Royals being that team that come out of the blue and sign somebody like Trevor Bauer. So if you're still holding on to hope, unfortunately, I might talk you off the ledge with that and say it's not likely to happen. Tyler asks on Twitter, who do you think the Royals would have to give up if they didn't end up trading for a closer? Of course, this all comes down to who they are targeting. And the guys that I brought up yesterday, Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, and Carlos Estevez, I do not think those guys would require the moon, which is why I kind of put them in that wheelhouse a little bit of making the most sense for Kansas City's bullpen if they are to acquire a closer. If you're going after, Kenley Jansen, you'd probably have to package a prospect there. I'm kind of looking at Finnegan and Harvey and Estevez and almost wonder if it could get done with a Drew Waters and maybe a 4A guy. I know you just acquired Devin Mann from the Dodgers, but maybe if you threw a Devin Mann into the conversation with Drew Waters, would that be enough? Maybe you could look into some of your starters in AAA. I mean, that's kind of the problem right now is the Royals don't have a ton to offer, but I also don't think I want them giving up a prospect for a closer. And I certainly don't want them trading for a guy who's not a closer to become a closer because there's 4 guys on the bullpen right now or in the bullpen that kind of have that characterization. They haven't closed out games yet, but they've got the ability to. If they're going to go get a closer, it is going to be a closer, a guy that was saving games for baseball teams elsewhere in 2023, which is why Kyle Finnegan and Carlos Estevez feel like two likely candidates. Again, I have no idea if they've made contact with Washington or the Los Angeles Angels. Those guys just feel like they're in the price range. So if you're going for those guys, I'd imagine Drew Waters and maybe a 4A guy could get it done. If they're being greedy and really wanting a prospect, you could always go hunting down in your high A ranks. And I think right now there's just really nobody that's untouchable in the farm system to me. There's guys I really like, but I'm not sure they've got that premier top prospect where I say absolutely not, you cannot trade that player. So we'll see how that all plays out, of course. Question number 3 comes from Aiden. He asks, if the Royals are seriously in contention for the division at the trade deadline, do you see the Royals going all in at the deadline to win the division this year? Great question here, and I'm going to say no. I do not believe if they are in position, they will take this as an all-in type of year. I think it's very comparable to 2013 if they are in the wild card divisional picture by the All-Star break. Because what that team did is they assessed who they had, and they just gambled on who they had. The same thing with the 2014 team as well. They didn't really make a move. In fact, 2015 and 17 were really the only years the Royals kind of put all their chips in. Remember, in 17, they got Trevor Cahill, Ryan Buchter, Brandon Maurer, and then also went out there and got Melky Cabrera to put with the core and kind of give that team one last chance to get to a World Series. 2014, they added Jason Frazier after the deadline and Josh Willingham, so not really moving the needle that much. Effective guys, but that's not going all in. And 2013, I think they acquired Justin Maxwell, and that was about it. That would make more sense to me if the Royals are actually in contention. They just don't have the resources. They don't have a loaded farm system where you could theoretically go all in. But love the question there from Aiden. Millerman asks, is Kenley Jansen realistic? I'm sure they are thinking about it if they're acquiring a closer, but here's where I kind of stop that. Aroldis Chapman just signed with the Pirates for $10.5 million. Okay, that would have been a very good price if the Royals wanted the reunion. Maybe he was never interested in one, but that price, $10.5 to $12 million, would have been worth it, I think, for Aroldis Chapman. Kenley Jansen is going to make $16 million this year. So unless they got Boston to pay for half of that salary by you packaging a prospect and another player to Boston, maybe it makes sense. So he's realistic, but at his price right now, it'd be more of a salary dump for Boston than anything. So we'll see if the Royals actually are interested in an outlet like that. It's realistic for sure, but some moving parts to it, I would probably say. Wesley asks, do you think it's possible the signing of Lugo and Waka and all the other 1 to 2 year deals are likely to be traded if they have good years? This comes back to where they are in terms of the contention. If they are out of it by the deadline, yes, I do think they're going to try to shop a couple of those guys. But if they are in the divisional race, if they're in the wild card picture, they're not going to trade those guys because there's not guys coming in behind them. That's what I think we saw Cleveland do a handful of years, is that Cleveland felt good about the guys that were replacing him. Therefore, they could trade a Mike Clevenger, right? They could trade a Corey Kluber. And they had pitching prospects right behind him that could take their place. Aaron Savale last year. The Royals don't have that. If they were to trade Lugo and Waka, they would have to be 100% sure there was somebody right behind them ready to go. And right now, there just really isn't. So if they are in the picture, they are not going to be trading those guys. If they are completely out of it, no chance at a second half resurgence, then I'd imagine they would try to move a couple of those guys by the trade deadline. Next question comes from Bob. Does Michael Massey have a decent shot to start at second base? Has connected well with Bobby Witt Jr. Right now, Michael Massey is my front runner to be the opening day second baseman in Kansas City. I actually found this great stat from Cespedes Barbecue. He's one of my favorite baseball Twitter followers out there. I would say that Michael Massey's numbers last year were largely due to some bad luck. And that tweet, that X post, whatever you want to say, basically showed that Michael Massey was the second unluckiest hitter in all of baseball last year. I think there's going to be some improvement. I think there's going to be some progression in 2024. And right now, he does have the front running spot there. I think Nick Lofton can give him a run for his money, but that's going to take a really bad spring from Michael Massey and a really good spring from Nick Lofton. So that's kind of where I'm at with Michael Massey. All right, so we still got plenty more questions to get into over the course of our Mailbag Friday segment, and we got about 8 or 9 left to go, so don't want to waste any more time on that. Let's cut to our first break of the show. When we return, more questions from Mailbag Friday on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15 and follow us on all your podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey. We're also on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to one of the title sponsors today in Gametime. I've already gotten my tickets for opening day, and I bought a couple of college basketball game tickets. I bought concert tickets, comedy show tickets, all on Gametime because it is the easiest app to use when buying tickets, whether you're preparing to go to that game or you are trying last minute to go to that game. It is just a great app to use. They show you the best possible deals, the cheapest tickets, most expensive. However you like to shop your tickets, Gametime has you covered. So here's what you need to do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Right now, all Gametime users get $100 off a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. That's VEGAS 100. Again, VEGAS 100. The terms apply, so just download the Gametime app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, for $20 off on your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Well, we still have got about 8 or 9 questions to get into, so let's hop back on the Twitter right now and get to those questions. This one comes from Ben. If any closer do you think we trade for, and who should we give up? So might have been a little bit of a typo there, unless someone's wrong on my screen here. Which closer do you think the Royals trade for, and who should we give up? Okay, so kind of similar to what we answered not too long ago. And that's not any fault to Ben, because I welcome any question. Even if I get 3 or 4 of the same questions, we're going to answer them in different ways. Kyle Finnegan and Hunter Harvey, Carlos Estevez, kind of on the top 3 lists for me. If they are really to push the envelope, if they feel like Kenley Jansen solidifies the bullpen, I think you could get away with all 4 of those guys not giving up the house, not giving up a ton. And I'm sure teams, when the Royals are calling, are going, well, that's a very depleted farm system, so we might look to the major league level. We may look to a Daniel Lynch or a Chris Bubich or, a Drew Waters. That might play in the favor of Kansas City, and I don't think they're going to trade a bullpen guy, because you don't trade a bullpen guy to get a bullpen guy. I think the Royals have some really good options right now. They just want that back-end guy to bridge the gap to. So those 4 feel likely because of who those teams have brought in. The Angels got a pair of closers. They got 3 guys that can close out games, and Matt Moore, Robert Stevenson, and Carlos Estevez. The Nationals have a co-closers right now. Go pick one of them, Kyle Finnegan or Hunter Harvey, and the other, one can be the closer in Washington. One of them can be the closer in Kansas City. So in terms of what they can give up, the Royals, I think, are going to be smart about this. I don't think they're going to give up a top 10, top 15 prospect. I think they're going to try to, take advantage of a roster jam, really. A roster crunch, if you will. The Royals have like 5 or 6 outfielders right now. They could package one of them and go get a closer if they sweetened up the deal a little bit with maybe a prospect by definition going at deal. I think Devin Mann, he's a little bit older. He's blocked by Nick Lofton and Tyler Gentry. I know you just acquired him, but it's something you can consider. Or Tyler Gentry could be that guy. I would not want to move on from Tyler Gentry, but I'm sure some names are being thrown around like that. Maybe Nick Lofton is being thrown around because Michael Massey and Michael Garcia are going to be starters right now in the infield. So that is what I kind of see as being offered up. Dairon Blanco, I think, is better than Drew Waters, but he's also older. He's going to be 31 in April. So if you are going to make it sound enticing, I think Drew Waters, being a former number 1 overall prospect in the Braves system, a top 100 prospect, it could be a sweetener to a team that's looking to unload a closer. Marty asks on Twitter, would you rather the Royals get a closer or trade Garcia for Edward Cabrera? Sorry, got that wrong. Yeah, Edward Cabrera of the Miami Marlins. Power sinker, can sit anywhere from 98 to 100 on that. Circle change goes from 94 to 96. Ridiculous stuff. Still deals with a little bit of command problems, but lights out stuff. I just do not think the Royals are going to be in a spot at this point in the offseason to subtract from their lineup. I think they have bolstered their rotation. Of course, it can get better, But right now, they need as much help as they can offensively. And trading away your leadoff hitter for a guy who really hasn't put it all together in 3 years might be a little bit risky. And also to throw on top of that, the Royals don't have a third baseman that's really ready right now. You brought in Garrett Hampson to be a utility guy, not an everyday third baseman. Nick Lofton is not ready to be an everyday third baseman. He could be, but right now it's Michael Garcia's spot to lose. He's had a great Winter League in Venezuela. His team is one win away from the championship, and we'll be talking about Michael in our final segment today. I just don't see it happening. I don't think I would be for trading Michael Garcia at this point. So I'd much rather see them trade for a closer than give up Michael Garcia for Edward Cabrera. I would love Edward Cabrera. I just don't think for that asking price, to be honest with you. I know some people think it's the right time to capitalize on Michael Garcia, but maybe see what he does this year. If he really takes off, then you got tremendous value, and you can either keep him there or you can flip him for more pitching in the next offseason. This question comes from John B. He asked, does it make sense to bring back Whit Merrifield? He would help the infield, outfield, and DH place. He can travel to Toronto now. We did do a podcast episode on this a couple weeks back. I think that bridge has been burned with Whit Merrifield. And I'm not sold that he really fits into the lineup. I believe Whit Merrifield is still a good ball player, and I don't think he's going to be that expensive, so it could be something to look into. The Royals, though, got their super utility guy, and Garrett Hampson to be the backup. I think they want Michael Massey or Nick Lofton to be the guy at second base. Bobby Witt Jr. is not going anywhere. Michael Garcia is not going anywhere. Vinny Pasquantino in the outfield. Seems like Melendez has left. Isbell's got center, and Hunter Renfroe's got right. They're not going to sign Whit Merrifield to be a center fielder nor a left fielder. They're not going to move any of those guys off their spot. So right now I'm going to say unlikely. And also the way things ended, though I'm not still making a big deal about it. I think it's more so of, I'm not sure Whit Merrifield would want to come back to Kansas City. And I'm not sure the front office would be too keen on the idea of giving him a contract to come back as well. This one comes from KC Preds fan. We got about 4 more to go here in a short amount of time. Do you think it's realistically possible for Nelson Velasquez to go past 30 home runs this season? I like to believe he can, but at the end of the season, pace seems kind of unsustainable. Curious to know your thoughts. Yeah, I do think it's unsustainable. I mean, that was I think a 60-some or 70-some home run pace. He's going to regress a little bit. Not to say he's going to be a bad DH, but I think the goal for Nelson should be over 20. I know that he nearly ran in the 20 himself and had 14 in Kansas City, but the pitchers are going to learn how to pitch to him now. It's going to be a little bit different, and I would just like him to see more of a well-rounded, approach at the plate. You can't just be this boom or bust guy that played only home runs. I mean, if you're going to hit only home runs, strike out a lot, well, you better walk a lot. If you're only going to be a hitter and not play the field, there's got to be more of an attractive element to your offensive game. So there is going to be some regression there, but getting over 30, that would be quite the explosion onto the scene for Nelson Velasquez. Right now, my goal for him is just get over 20. I think over 20 home runs, over 70 RBIs would be a damn good first full season for Nelson Velasquez, because you got to keep that in mind. He's never been an everyday player before, and that at times is going to expose him in the lineup 1 through 9. Next question we got here is from Briley. He says, in your opinion, who's the most solid, reliable choice of a jersey to buy, as in who of our current roster is least likely to blow it this year? 100% confidence, get yourself a Bobby Witt Jr. jersey if you haven't. That I can say with full confidence, he is going to be a star. I am not worried in the slightest. Second one, if I'm going to gamble a little bit more, Cole Reagans would be a fun one. I do think he's going to be really good this year. Vinny Pasquantino, another great pick. And then if you're kind of wanting an off-the-wall one, I mean, I think a Michael Wacha jersey would be kind of cool. I'm sure they're going to be sold in the team store, so something to look at there. I would say, Michael Garcia jersey would be great. I might even look into that myself. Maybe see where MJ's going in the early parts of the year. That'd be fun. But the safest pick, it's a no-brainer for me. Bobby Witt Jr., then probably Vinny, and then Cole Reagans. I think are the top 3 there for buying your jerseys. Jeremy asks on Twitter, who's the most realistic trade target as far as a closer, and what would it cost? Also, who would you like to see added to the team via trade? I'm going to go back to Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, Estevez, those 3, of course, Kenley Jansen. So we're going to go back to those main 4 there. I just never saw any closers that made a ton of sense in terms of that team dealing to Kansas City. Either that closer was too good. I know David Bednar was brought up for Pittsburgh. They're not unloading him. They brought Chapman to make that a 2-headed monster in the bullpen. They're not going to give Bednar up to Kansas City for not a lot in return, let's be honest. So those kind of feel, again, like the main targets for the bullpen. And yeah, I think where roster crunch the Royals have is in the outfield. Drew Waters has some value. Maybe Waters wins the center field job and Isbell becomes valuable. But again, you need to package a prospect anywhere from Devin Mann, maybe Tyler Gentry, Nick Lofton. Maybe you look to somebody like I would hate to move on from Carson Rockefeller or Spencer Nivens or Jared Dickey. That would upset a lot of Royals fans, but I'm sure they're being called about because they're so fresh into their professional career. But that's probably what it's going to take. Maybe they could go the pitching route there. Will Klein, which is out of the 40-man roster, but I just don't see a team trading a closer to get pitching or relief pitching in return from the minor league level. So those are some names I'll throw out there for now until I get a better grasp on it. And lastly, 150 Guacamole asks, what happens to James MacArthur if we trade for a big name closer? He'll still be a 6th or 7th inning guy. I think the Royals think very highly of him, and they expect big things from him. They just don't want to put all the pressure on him immediately because of his September success and go, now you're the closer, right? I think they want him to be solidified into a role, kind of the fireman of he can come in the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. We're just going to be bridging that gap to the closer in the 9th inning. So James MacArthur's not going to lose a role or anything like that. He's still going to have a pretty damn big role for the Royals bullpen in 2024. All right, thank you to everybody that submitted some questions on a Mailbag Friday. Hopefully my answers were sufficient enough to you, and you can always send them over to me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15, or reach out to me on the YouTube channel at locked_on_Royals. Really, there's no bad way to look us up, and there's no bad way to send us a question. Very, very easy to do so. Before we move on to our final segment, a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. When we return, Maikel Garcia's home run in the Venezuelan Winter League resulted in a brawl that went viral. We'll discuss it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the other sponsor today in FanDuel. The NFL postseason is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, finding bets in the new Explore tab, making a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which, by the way, is the best way to find popular parlays, and much, much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. That's FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. And here in Kansas City, we got a massive game coming up on Sunday, 2 p.m. kickoff. Chiefs and Ravens in the AFC Championship game. Plenty of prop bets to go around, plenty of totals that you can look into. First-time touchdown scores, anytime touchdowns. You can bet on kickers for all I care. Just be experienced with it. Start betting, making some money, feel good about yourself so you kind of find your niche and what to bet on. But football, that can be a lot of people's niches. Maybe it's college basketball. So if it is college basketball, start gearing up for the NCAA tournament where you can place some bets and maybe pick some big-time upsets coming up here in March. But maybe you want to save it for baseball. And when that rolls around, I'll be sure to give you the best advice I can for betting on Major League Baseball. But be sure to go create your FanDuel account right after listening to this podcast episode today. Well, there was a viral video that went out from multiple accounts. I can't even pinpoint one. I think John Boy posted it, Barstool had posted it, of this brawl in the Venezuelan Winter League that had Yasiel Puig, in the middle of it, former Royal Alcides Escobar in the middle of it. I mean, it was nasty. I mean, they were really going at it. Punches being thrown, haymakers being thrown. And the funniest thing about it is before this video went viral, I had known why this brawl had happened. And it was because a video had been posted that morning of the entire situation. This entire chaotic event that happened from start to finish. And lo and behold, it started because Maikel Garcia hit a go-ahead 2-run home run in their championship series in the bottom of the 8th inning. At home, crowd goes ballistic. And we have discussed before on the podcast that Maikel Garcia's flair, his intensity, his swagger has really blossomed in the Venezuelan Winter League. It does mean more to a lot of players in that league. You may think it's some off-season little fun, tune-up, extra spring training league. It's not. It is very intense down there. Even guys like Ronald Acuna Jr., who played with Maikel on the same team this offseason, he was getting fired up for games. And this is a guy that's played in the World Series. That's won a World Series. That's an MVP candidate this year. It means a lot to them to play for their country, play back in the cities they grew up in. And having that intensity, having that spark, that flare, that fire, it happens all the time. And I thought it was interesting to see both sides of the arguments for Maikel Garcia, because what he did, celebrating his home run, he would have gotten a fastball to the ribs at the big league level. That is without question. It would have resulted in a brawl at the major league level as well. So in any way he did this, that was going to be the result. But also, it was a dramatic home run. These were two rivals. There had been chirping back and forth all game, and Maikel hits the home run dead center. Just knew it off the bat. Bat flips, turns around. He's chirping. He's mouthing off to the dugout. Takes his time going around the bases. He gets to third base. He starts mouthing off with the dugout again. He gets to home plate, and he kind of does this. If you watch the NBA, Damian Lillard pointing to his wrist, pointing to his watch, which I'm assuming, it's game time. It's over. Or maybe it's my time. I don't know. Carlos Correa did it as well for baseball fans in the postseason. You know what, antic I am mimicking right now. But to me, it was very interesting to see the arguments on both sides. One side, I love it, man. I want to see this at Kauffman Stadium this year. I want to see Maikel Garcia have this type of intensity, this swagger, this flair when he hits a go-ahead home run, when he's got a big-time hit late in the game. I don't know if it'll go to that length where it will result in a brawl. First things first, I'm just glad that nothing came out of injuries. That's the last thing you want when a brawl happens, is injuries to happen. I had somebody tweet at me and say, I just watched the video and he should have gotten his ass kicked for that. There's going to be, a very fine line on which side somebody falls on. Maybe you're more of the old school of, I never want to see a player do that. Or maybe you're on the side of, I love it. I encourage this in baseball because it makes it more fun. And I think everybody would say seeing a brawl in baseball, assuming everybody gets out healthy, is exhilarating. It's exciting. It shows the passion, the rivalry, the bitterness. There's also ways, sportsmanship-wise, that you can handle hitting a home run. And Maikel Garcia immediately turned to that bench, turned to that dugout, and started mouthing off. Now, this was also fascinating to me. I had someone respond to me and kind of give a context as to why Maikel Garcia was so quick to turn around and mouth off. Because here's what I think a lot of people don't know about Maikel Garcia. And I don't know him personally. I've been in the clubhouse. We've had chances to interview him before. He is a more soft-spoken guy. English is not his first language, but he's not somebody that walks in and just immediately captures the room of just his personality. It's just like a booming type of aura. He doesn't really have that, right? He's more of a quiet, he takes care of business on the field, and that's the way he handles it. So it would take a lot, in my opinion, for him to be that expressive. And this person on Twitter responded to me and said, Maikel Garcia mouthed back because in his, at bat, they were chirping at him. They were chirping at him, calling him weak, that he was too scared for this moment. And so, and again, I can't confirm or deny that. I wasn't there. There's no audio from that dugout, but I'd imagine with how intense these games are, something like that can happen. Something like that can ignite a fire in a player. And boy, did it. A go-ahead 2-run home run to put his team on the doorstep of winning a championship, and he let everybody know about it. If anything, it got me fired up to just say, let's start the damn season already. So good for Maikel Garcia. Hopefully he can bring home a championship before showing up to surprise and beginning spring training with the Royals for yet another season. All right, that's going to do it for the week of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Always be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15 and follow us on all the podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You have a great weekend, and we will talk to you early next week, Kansas City.